Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to continue forward in Book 2 of the Iliad, looking at lines 76 through 94. This is the passage where the assembling of the Greeks is described. Eitoi ho go sepon, kata hesdeto, toise daneste nestor, hos rapuloi o anats, ein hamotel entos. Ho spin eu phroneon, agore sato kai metewepen. O biloi argeon, hegetores ede medontes. Ekentis ton oneron, agaion alos anispe. Pseudos ken by men, kai nos bis doi meta malon. Nun, diden hos mega aristos akaion euketai enai. Al aget aiken pos, dorek somen huias akaion. Hos arabone sas bulas ex ergene estai. Hoi de panes de san, betonto de poimenilaon, scape du goi basileas, epes uonto de la oi. E ute in de aese, melisaon hadinaon, petres ex glabures, ie neon ergomenaon, botrudon de beton die, ep andesen arenoisen. Hai mententa halis pepote da die, hai dete inta. Hos don in de apola, neon apokaeklesiaon, eonos proparoi de bade es estigo onto, Iladon es agoren, meta despesin osa de o trunus ienai, dios angelos, hoi dageronto. Okay, so doi ho go sepon, kata hesdeto, toise daneste nestor, hos rapuloi o anax ein hemato entos. So here to begin, the only unusual word we have, or new word, is hemato entos, which is an epithet of Pylos, the place that Nestor is from, and it means sandy, abounding in sand, because this was a seaside place. And and you can see amatos, hemato ace, that alpha becomes an eta, and that's the origin of it. So eitoi ho go sepon, kata hesdeto. And of course the ho is Agamemnon, hos epon, thus speaking, kata hesdeto. Toisen daneste nestor, hos ra bu loi o anax, ein hemato entos. Ho sven eu phroneon, agore sato kai metewepen. O biloi argeon hegetores ede medontes. E mentis ton oneron akaion alos enispe. So here we have hegetor, hegetores, a leader, and medontos is a counselor. So hegetores ede medontes. It kind of comes together as being leading counselors of the Argives. O piloi, argeon, egetores ede medontes. So both egetores and medontes are actually vocatives here. Amentis ton oneron, akai on alos anispe. Now here the ton is, as often in Homer, a demonstrative. So if anyone else spoke of this dream, ton oneron, amentis ton oneron, akai on alos anispe. So anispe is second aorist, meaning to speak of or to mention, talk about. Pseudos ken by men, kai nos bizdoi metamalon. Nun diden hos megaristos akai on euketainai. Al aget aiken pos dorig somen huias akaion. So pseudos is a falsehood, a lie, a piece of deceit. So it adds to the irony that this actually is a deceitful dream, that Nestor believes it because it's coming from Agamemnon. So pseudos ken, by men. And paimen, of course, is from peme. We would declare. This is a potential optative. We would declare. Nos bizdoi meta. Nos bizdomai is to turn away from, in incredulousness or disdain, almost like we say in English to distance ourselves from. Nun diden hos meg aristos akai on uketai enai. And so nun, eden, hos. And so we see this inversion of the word order. The hos, again, referring to Agamemnon. Well, I guess it's not really an inversion if you take this as a defining relative clause. We've just suppressed the subject Eden, or haven't explicitly named the subject Nunde, but now, as a matter of fact, he sees it. Hos meg aristos akai on euketai enai. Al aget aiken post dorig somen huias akaion. Hos arapone sas, pules exercene estai. Hoi depanes de san, betonto te poimena la on. So this erka ne estai is initiate departure. So he initiated departure. Ex erka ne estai. And ep anisteme, we'll talk about this a little more, is to rise up after him. So hoide an ep aneste san, i.e., we are to imagine Nestor rising and moving out first and the rest of the chiefs following him. Hoi depaneste san, beton tote poimena la on. And so poimenos is a shepherd, and poimen laon is a shepherd of the host. This is a very common term referring to the kings and chiefs of the Achaeans. Hoi depanes de san petontote poimeni laon. And poimeni, of course, is dative because the idea of obeying or following, petonto, is completed by a dative object. Now, regarding epanes de san, this is a good opportunity to show an ambiguity in Greek morphology, whereby the first aorist and the second aorist of istemi actually are indistinguishable, but they are actually made up differently. So you see in the first case, the first aorist, ep on estes on, you see how I divided it. You have the sigma that attaches to the verbal stem marking the aorist, and so your third plural ending is the alpha nu. That's of the first aorist, the transitive or causative sense of the word. Whereas in your second aorist, the ending, the personal ending, is actually sigma alpha nu, and it attaches to the simplified esta stem. But you get the same form, ep anestesan, but in each case, the sigma is doing a different thing. So let's look at this. You see, if you compare on the far left, I have the conjugation of the second aorist, estain, estes, este, estemen, estete, estesan. And that's what we have here. So let's look at the entry as we find it in the intermediate Lindell and Scott. You'll see ep anisteme, and in the first aorist, that is in this causative or transitive sense, ep anestesa, we find it in Plato meaning to set up again, to set up again. Or we find it in Plutarch, to make to rise against, to make to rise against, i.e. in rebellion. Ep an isteme, ep anestesa, I make to rise against. But under the Roman numeral 2, in the passive, with a future middle, and in the second aorist imperfect, active, and this is what we're dealing with now, the second aorist active, it means to stand up after another, or to stand up at his word. And we see that's what it means in the Iliad. So that's what we're dealing with here. Hoi depaneste san, this second aorist active. But it also means, in Aristophanes, to rise from bed, and in Demosthenes, to rise to speak, and even of buildings in Aristophanes, to be raised. It can also mean, Herodotus can use it in the second aorist, to rise up against, to rise in insurrection against, with a dative object. And Thucydides uses it that way as well. And then it used by those two authors absolutely to just means to rise in insurrection. Absolutely meaning it doesn't need the dative object. So this is just a good example of kind of how careful you have to be, especially when encountering these third plural forms of the first and second aorist of isteme, because there can be confusion and you have to be on your toes. Okay, so hos araponesas boules exerce ne estai, hoi de banes de san, betonto te poimenilaon. Scape du goi basile es, epes u onto de la oi. So epes u omai is to hasten in a particular direction, and we see that after this description of or balancing this description of the leaders leaving the tent under Nestor's leadership, we have it's added on that the rest of the army, the laoi, epesau onto, and they hastened in a particular direction. Now this next bit will be controlled by eute and hos, just as thus, and this will introduce our first extended simile of the Iliad. And of course, these extended similes are justly celebrated as staples of Homeric form, literary form. So, eute eth nea e se, Melisaon ha dinaon, Petres ek glabures, I neon ergomenaon, Brotudon de betontai, ep andesen arenoisen. Hai mententa halis pepo deatai, hai dete enta. Hos don en deapola neon apokai klisiaon. Ionos proparoi de ba de espigo onto. Iladon es agoran. So we see, just as, the throngs of bees go and pedontai and fly, so did the host, the swarms of the soldiers. Host ton ethnea esti go onto. So again, this is the first extended simile of the Iliad, where the Achaeans flocking to the assembly, coming out of their tents and ships, are likened to bees flying out of a hollow rock and landing hither and thither on the spring blooms. So let's look at the vocabulary of this simile. So, ute ethnia ese melisaon ha dinaon, Petres ek glabures, neon ergomenaon. So, ethnia, ta ethnia here is a swarm of bees. Melissa, feminine, is a bee. So, ute ethnia ese is they shall go. Melisaon ha dinaon. Petres et glabures. So handinos eon is, when speaking of bees, flying in swarms, like thickly packed, but here's flying in swarms. Petre is a rock. Glapuros, glaperon is hollow. So eut de ethnea ese melisaon hadinaon, Petres ek glapures, neon ergomenaon. Botrudon de bedontai, ep andesen arenoisen. So botrudon is an adverb in clusters, and it's based on batruos, masculine, which is a bunch of grapes. So in clusters, petomai, they fly. And anthos is a flower or a bloom. And eraninos is of springtime, of or during springtime. So they fly ep antesen arenoisen. Now, the fact that this verb of flying is completed or modified by this adverbial expression of ep plus the dative usually marks the place, the destination, not so much the destination. It doesn't emphasize movement towards so much as resting upon once you've gotten there. So this is very subtle, the way the ep desen arenoisen is getting used to emphasize that the bees rest upon the blooms that they fly to. Hai mententa halis pepo deatai, hai dete enta. So halis again in swarms, and pepote is to fly about. Pepote atai. This is our perfect third plural. And hai, the hai mententa, hai de enta. some in one direction, others in another direction. So this is a good example of men and de used in an otherwise almost identical structure. Hai men tenta, hai de te enta, meaning, some in this direction, others in that direction, hither and thither. So, hos ton en dea, pola neon apo kai klesia on. So now, just like the bees, thus also ton, of them. Here again, the article as a demonstrative, of them, of the Greeks, entheia, the groupings, pola, neon apo kai klesia on. Notice the placement of the accent over apo being on the first syllable. That means it actually affects neon. It's prepositionally placed after neon, but so apo neon kai klesia apo neon kai apo klesia from their ships and from their tents. So hos ton ethne pola neon apo kai klesia he ionos proparoi te bare es estiko onto. Iladon es agoran, meta desfesen osa de e. So we have a ionos, which is the beach or shore of the sea. So we always have to have the visual topography of the Greek ships drawn up on the shores of Troy, and the citadel of Troy itself sitting far up and away on the hillside, and the fighting going on the plain between the shore and the walls of the city. So proparoiten is in front of, before, and pateis, of course, is deep, or the width, referring to the width of the shore. Stika omai is to proceed or to make one's way towards. Estiko onto. Hiladon, adverbial, means in crowds. So, hos ton enta pola neona po kai klisi aon. He ionos proparoi te pate es estiko onto. Iladon es agorein. Meta desvesen osa de e. O trunus ienai. Dios angelos. Hoi dagelonto. So the osa here, which the editor has to choose whether to capitalize it or not, I myself would prefer to capitalize it, is rumor personified. And so de e is here, excuse me, I left off the iota, but de e, to spread like wildfire. It was spreading like wildfire. You can imagine the Greeks all having their own ideas of why they might be being summoned. And o through no is to rouse, and it's completed by the infinitive. They rouse, ianai, to go, rousing to go. The rumor drives them on. And so, and we have dios angelos. The rumor itself is a messenger of Zeus. And hoi da ge onto. This is the middle, again, of agero, to come together or assemble. And they were assembling. E toi ho go sepon, kata hesdeto, toi se daneste nestor, hosra puloyo anax ein, hemeto entos, ho spin brane on, agora satokai meteweipen, o biloi argeon hegetores ede medontes, mentis ton oneron, akai on a los enespe. Siudos ken by men, kai nos bis doi meta malon. Nun diden hos megaristos, akai on ugetainai. Al aget aiken pos, do rexomen huias akaion. Hos araponesas bulas exergene estai. Hoi depones de san, Spethonto de poemeni laon. Scape ducoi basilees. Epes euonto de laoi. Ute ethne a ese melisa on hadinaon. Petres ecla pures, I ene on ecomenaon. Brought through don de pepontai, ep antesen arenoisen. Hai mententa halis pepo deatai, hai dete enta. Hos ton in diabola, ne on apokai ecclesiaon. Ionos proparoi de baries esti go onto. Iladon es agoren. Meta desvesen osa dede o thronos ienai. Dios angelos. Hoi dageronto. Okay, so here I found this wonderful picture of a bee approaching a bloom, actually resting upon the ante, lepiante, and to pay homage to the fact that, again, this is our first extended metaphor of the Iliad, and these we will watch out for and find that they are a marvelous adornment to the Homeric art. Okay, so keep working hard, and I'll see you again soon. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.